I have extreme confirmation bias now that I have laid out the stats for Tua and for Justin Herbert. So do you just want me to kind of go through it or go through the process or
Well, I think that might be a good place to start, actually. What is the process?
so basically my process when I'm looking at team stats, and I mean we can put it on the screen here, but it's kind of hard to see, so I don't know if it's going to do us any good. But that's fine. I'll just go without it. But basically I always start with team plays, and I like to go by plays per game, multiply it out, and then from there I look at pass and rush rates for the team. And so the pass rate off of total plays gives me pass attempts, right? And I want to make sure I'm not outlier on any of those. The thing with projections, you never want to be the outlier. You can't predict the sudden fall off or the huge breakout with projections. You should never be going to that. What you should do is you're looking to actually put statistics out there so you can see where you're really at on a player. And like I said, you're not going to project the breakout. So I actually nerfed down Tua after I had him initially. What I told you about, I brought him down earlier today. And I'll just kind of explain it real quick. But yeah, so I go through plays, pass rate, and then I lay out the quarterback's 3-year sample as previous 3 years for completion percentage, yards per attempt, touchdown rate, and interception rate. I use a 3-year percent or a 3-year look, and then also career average. So I want to see what outliers he had, but also where's he been the most recent, right? Like when I'm looking at Matthew Stafford, I don't need to look at all the Detroit years, right? The last 3 years, and then I also want to factor in um, any changes in the coaching staff, and then possibly what that coordinator or head coach did at other places, just to try and move the needle up or down a little bit with all these numbers. But again, I look at completion percentage. The yards per attempt is a big one because that's where I get my yardage at. So again, try not to get with the outlier there. And then touchdown rate is kind of a fun one to guess because touchdowns are so hard to predict. But a lot of guys who stay in a certain range in touchdown rates, they might spike 1 year, but they'll always kind of bring themselves back down to a medium. So put all that together, come out with what my projections are. And with the Dolphins, here we go. So with the Dolphins, I had Tua. I am at 574 attempts. That's 33.7 a game. It's just a little bit higher than what his average was on the 11 healthy games. So take out the 2 games he left early. He was at 30, I think it was like 33.48 is what he averaged in those games. So now I'm at 33.79. So I had to I dropped his pass attempts down a little bit to help nerf him. But also, so his yards per attempt was an interesting one. Last year, he led the league at 8.9. And I think he's going to be towards the top of the league again. But again, I don't think I didn't predict anyone over 8. I had 2 guys at 8, and that was it. I put Mahomes there. I wasn't about to put anyone else there um, above that. So with Tua, I ended up settling at 7.9. I know it sounds a little tacky, but he's a career 7.4, and then his first year with McDaniel jumps to an 8.9. So I definitely think he's going to be closer to the 8 again. And then all said and done, it comes out to about 4,500 yards and 30 touchdowns. With his touchdown rate, let's see, where did I go with him? Oh, I just lost him. Tua.
Where are you to
Why did I just like go blind there? Oh my God, here we go.
I was gonna
So,
say
so
okay, you got
yeah,
him?
his touchdown rate took a large jump last year. His career is a 4.8. Last year he was up to a 6.3. He was never over. He was kind of floating around 4, just above or below. I brought him up to a 5.3. I feel like that's kind of a happy medium. So I brought him a full point down in yards per attempt and a full point down in touchdown rate, and I still got him at 4,500 yards and 30 touchdowns. So I think that's if he plays 17 and Waddle and Hill are both healthy, I think 4,530 is a pretty good, I almost want to say floor. That's like the first level of the house. Like, it's the
Right.
first flight of stairs. Like,
Yeah.
it's not ground level, but it's not nearly to the ceiling.
Yeah, because right, like calling 4,500 yards the floor is insane,
Yeah.
right?
And I looked through and I wanted to make sure I wasn't too high on everything. I looked at how many quarterbacks went for over 4,000 last year, or how many teams had over 4,000 passing yards last year. And I wanted to make sure I wasn't even an outlier in there. So I even nerfed some guys down if I had them around 41 or 4,200. And I'm like, that might be a couple hundred too high. And I would bring them down. So like I said, I really try and baseline it and not just throw a bunch of numbers at the wall and hope they stick.
Right. By the way, looking at last year, Kirk Cousins was 4,529.
Yeah.
So, like, could he just be what Kirk Cousins was last year, right? A heavy pass first offense, like with Dalvin Cook in the backfield. Yeah, probably. He could probably just be that, you
Yeah.
know? And this is why we love, I love it because it just justifies what we've been saying, right? It explains the process of how we come up with where we've gotten. We've been saying all offseason that Tua, because of having Waddle and Tyreek, that just gives him this unbelievable opportunity.
Yeah. And like I said, I think if that trio stays healthy all year, and Mike McDaniel, let's not forget, we need him to stay healthy too.
This is true.
But yeah, if we keep all those guys healthy, I definitely think that my first initial projection, I had him with more pass attempts, and I think I had his yards per attempt at 8, and I dropped it by point 0.1. But anyways, I had him at 4,800 yards on the first go around. So then I realized I was about 2 more attempts per game above what he was in his 11 healthy ones last year. I don't think he's going to see that high of an uptick in pass attempts. So now he's like point 0.3 higher than what he was in that stretch. So I think I have a good baseline of where Tua is, but it um, definitely like confirms my height for him. Now with Justin Herbert, this was kind of a fun one. I definitely had fun with this one. But I I don't want to say I just threw last year out the window, but
You
I
threw last year out the
definitely looked a
window.
lot heavier at the 2 years before that, right? And then I also looked at some stats that Dak had with Kellen Moore, like his yards per attempt, and basically where Herbert was in 20 and 21 and where Dak was in 21-22, they each had a 7.3 and a 7.5 season in those years. So I was like, that seems a lot more realistic than the 6.8 yards per attempt that Herbert had last year. But those were the 2 seasons I really focused on for each quarterback to get where I'm going to be with Herbert now that he has Kellen Moore as his offensive coordinator. So where I landed on him, if I could, oh, now I realize why it's taking me so long to find these. I had sorted them by a different stat, so they're no longer in alphabetical order. So that was fun. All right. So I end up with Herbert at 678 pass attempts. So he's obviously one of the highest pass attempts of anyone in the league for me. I came out at just over 5,000 yards, which I know I just did a rant about how I don't want to project anyone too high. The only two I have there is Mahomes and Herbert. Herbert is just volume.
Right.
Mahomes is 8 yards per attempt and being Patrick Mahomes, but Herbert is just volume. A lot of passing work, 7.5 yards per attempt, which isn't crazy. The league average I projected was 7.19
That is tied for his career best.
for
Herbert.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's totally fine because it's not like it was an outlier like he had the 7.3 as well. So I mean, I could put him at 7.4 and just say I split the difference, but
I would be happier if you went 7-4.
I'll put it at 7.4. I'll tell you what it came out at. He's at 5,019.
There
So
you go.
he still breaks it. So we'll leave it. And I have him at if you round up, he's at 38 touchdowns.
Which
So
is what he was in 2021 also, his career high.
yeah. So I pretty much have Herbert having a career year or right up there with what his career year was.
Being 2021, Justin Herbert,
Yeah.
which is great. And one thing I'm very curious to see, because I love the way you do your projections. Like it is scientific projections. I'm giving you a little bit of crap for kind of throwing
No,
last year
but
totally out.
you need another set of eyes to double check some stuff because
Yeah.
when I came back, this morning to look at it. I was like, "Whoa." I thought I approached Tannehill and the Titans really good Thursday, and I look at it this morning, I'm like, "I'm way too high. Like, I gotta bring this back down." So you do need like, you have to come back yourself and look at it, but you also need another set of eyes to look at it and be like, "Hey, that's you're you're a little out there on that one."
Right.
But yeah, so I like to check on some other sources too and make sure I'm not gonna be an insane outlier on anybody. And if I am an insane outlier on anyone, which I usually am not, then I gotta look at my process and figure out, well, do I truly believe that that can happen, or am I just being asinine here?
So I do have two questions for you here
Yeah.
on your Herbert. One's on Herbert, one's on the Chargers,
Okay.
and Austin Eckler. On Herbert, what did you have his completion percentage at?
I have him at 66.
Okay. I think that's fine. Because I was going to mention how last year, with the lower yards per attempt, he did have a much higher
He
completion
did. Yep.
percentage.
So his career is 66.9. The 2 years I was using for yards per attempt of 2021, he was 66.6 and
Yep.
65.9.
Yep. I just want to make sure.
So,
I just want to make sure that you're kind of
oh
throwing
yeah.
out 2022 on the bad stuff. You're also throwing it out on the good stuff. So I
Yep.
just wanted to.
I did the same thing where I looked at that. I'm like, okay, well, there's a 2% spike the year his yards per attempt, the only year it went below 7. So yeah, throw it farther down the field. I gotta do this and throw it farther down the field. You're gonna complete less passes. That's why Philip Rivers always had a 70% completion percentage.
Yep.
So you just check down all day.
My other question. This is one you're not at yet, but when you
Mhm.
do the rest of the Chargers,
Yeah.
what do you think your target's going to be for Austin Eckler?
So I try not to look at like a specific number that I put on them. I always go by market share. And so that way it's a percentage that I'm putting in, and then it'll populate the number for me. And then I'm going to see whether I think I'm way high, way too high, or way too low. But I am probably going to look at what Kellen Moore's total target share to running backs was over the last couple of years. But also, I'm going to look at what Austin Eckler got. And again, I will try and not make it like an outlier year or anything. But he had, let's see, he had kind of his outlier
Oh
year
yeah.
last year
So he had 127 last year
on targets,
on
107
targets.
catches.
Yeah.
So I'm probably,
I'm thinking more of his 2021 94 targets.
yeah, I'm probably going to come in at the low 90s. Like I might be like between 89 and 92, 93. So I never mind being close to a number as long as I'm not at the same number, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm really fascinated to see where you end up with Eckler because I feel like if he only has about 90 targets and if he doesn't have an insane touchdown year, I get a little worried about Austin Eckler.
Yeah, I mean, definitely having 107 catches pushes him, like helps him be at the running back. He RB1 in full PPR last year?
Oh, he almost had to be.
Yeah.
He had 13 rushing touchdowns, and he had 12 the year before. So this is why I've always kind of been a little hesitant on Austin Eckler. To me, he does not profile as a goal line back. And for the last 2 years, he's gone for 12 rushing touchdowns and 13 rushing touchdowns. I think it's really hard to project him for that many. When
Yeah.
the 4 years before that, he went 2-3-3-1. So to me, he's much more of a 7 touchdown projection. And if he now is going to go down to like a 90 target projection, I think the projections aren't going to be real kind to Austin Eckler.
They may not be, but yeah, he got 12 and 13 on the ground. He did 8 and 5 through the air. I think I'm totally fine giving him about 6 touchdowns through the air. So even if I bring him down to 7 or 8 touchdowns there, he's still going to be 13, 14 total touchdowns.
True.
That's going to help. Also, that is one thing kind of a rule I have for myself is outside of maybe like a Derrick Henry is to not project over 10 touchdowns. Like if I give you 10 touchdowns at any position, receiver or running back, then that's as high as I'm going to go. I think
Yeah.
the only receiver that I went over with the last couple years has been Devontae Adams because he's
That's what I was
done
thinking.
it.
Yeah.
And then I think running back has been Henry. But other than that, yeah, I pretty much try and make sure I max myself out at 10 touchdowns rushing Now, obviously, total, like McCaffrey's going to go over 10 total, right?
Yeah.
Because I'll have him some through the air, some through the ground. But yeah, that's one of the rules I have for myself to try and make sure I don't end up like being way crazy on somebody. Now, I think it was 2 seasons ago when I did these. Um, I did not enter the market share for touchdowns for 3 teams and did not realize it until I had put everyone in 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 their rankings to see where I was on them. And McCaffrey was still my RB1 without I think receiving or rushing touchdowns, maybe both, but he was still my RB1 without the touchdowns. And I was like, all right, I might be a little too high on.
But honestly, you were probably right about right, though.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't think I was being that crazy on him, but uh I didn't freeze out there, did I?
You did. You did for just a
Okay.
second there.
All right. So yeah, the projection side is fun. It's very time consuming, and it's been really hard to find time the last 6 weeks. I had a lot going on, so I got kind of a later start than I wanted on this. But yeah, I'm excited to get them finished and kind of see where we're at. And there's going to be a lot of content out of that too. So
Yeah, I've
and
I've started ranking, or I'm started projections for the first time this year. It is very time consuming. I'm only through like 7 teams.
yeah. I have found a way to get more efficient every year. So this year is the first year that I've laid out all the projected team stats. I usually wait until I'm on that team to project out their team stats. And then last year, I ended up going to each page and just doing their team stats in a row. Like I would do a team stat, then go to the next team. So this year, I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to put them all in one doc and do it that way. And I think that'll help speed things up a lot. But yeah, every year I'm figuring out ways to kind of streamline the process and make it easier on myself and a little more enjoyable, because when you have to do all the grunt work part of it where you're laying it all out, that part kind of sucks. Like that's not where the fun is, and it's time consuming, and yeah, you can kind of burn yourself out on it if you're not careful. But I think projections are very helpful because you, like I said, you can get an idea of, okay, I love this player, but do the stats really make sense for them to have a breakout year? Does this offense really allow them to do the things that I'm showing in my rankings right now? And that's why I always like to have rankings first and then do projections. And then I like to see, okay, well, these projections could make or break Amari Cooper for me, right? Like I'm like over the moon for him, but I just made sure that I didn't go too crazy with pass attempts uh for the Browns. So when it's all said and done and I'm looking at it, okay, well, maybe I project Amari Cooper out of my top 15. And then at that point I can be like, okay, well, I actually need to cool the Jets a little on Cooper. But that's what makes these very useful.
Yeah, and oh no.
I saw that building for so long.
I've been so good this entire
uh
time.
yeah.
I am so sorry, America. Uh,
If only they made a button
if
that
only.
would mute sound.
And you know what?
There we go. That's much better. But this is definitely our longest episode that we've had, and I'm loving the new setup. If you haven't checked it out yet, you got to go check out our YouTube page. So you can see the new video setup. It looks really nice. I think we've kind of exasperated
You've seen
Titans
me.
talk.
You've seen me fight back a sneeze to then a fail. I did have a
Yeah.
point though that I was gonna make though,
Okay.
and that was I have always kind of pushed back on projections a little bit
Hmm.
because I don't think it's a good thing to take them too literal. Like you said,
Yes.
you don't project high end or low end thing. You don't project
Yep.
risk, right?
Yep.
You kind of project a median outcome for everybody. And so I think it's really important that people don't take projections and just turn them into rankings. Because
Yes.
if you do, then you're probably going to end up really, really high on like a veteran running back, right? It's not going to
Yeah.
factor in that age risk. You're probably going to end up a little bit lower. It's really hard. We talked sometimes about that, how there are players that we say, well, it's really hard to project what we think could actually happen there, though. And so I think that's just a really important thing to take note of is I think for projections, you almost get more use out of becoming so intimate with the details, right?
Yeah.
Right, because you do comb through everything so closely that you can find every little bit of detail in there. But I think it's also just important to note that like it's really hard to project Devontae Smith over AJ Brown, right?
Yeah.
But I do think that with what I saw towards the end of last year, that's the way I have it ranked.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I like to look at certain samples. So, if and when I do the Eagles, I'm definitely going to look at the tale of 2 seasons with them and see if I can figure out which way I want to direct them over the course of 17 projected games for 23. So, for instance, one that I had fun with putting together was the Colts. Anthony
mm,
Richardson. What is
yeah,
that going to look like, right? Because we know Shane Steichen has came over from the Eagles, 2 years with Jalen Hurts. He's come over and now he has Anthony Richardson, right? But what I looked at, I went back and looked at the second half of the 21 season where the Eagles were super run heavy when they started winning, right? So I was looking at that. What was their pass rate? What was the completion percentage? And then um I was looking at that. And then I also went over to Chicago and I was looking at pass rates the Bears were using with Fields because it felt like either they were trying to in-game tank or they were trying to ease in the amount of throwing they wanted him to do, right? And I kind of took a little bit of that into consideration but mostly looked at Steichen's second half of 21 with the Eagles, and that's kind of how I came up with the Colts numbers.
yeah, I think that's why I love about it for you. Is it is such a scientific way of going about it. You know, like you said, going with
Yeah, and
Steichen to help
I
project
used
Richardson.
to I used to not look at any projections. I thought they were all stupid. I was like, "There's no way you can project all this out." Until I was listening to some podcasts that were breaking down processes, and once I heard that, I was like, "Well, I got to try this out for myself." I actually believe it was our boy Heath Cummings that broke down his process. Whatever that was. This is my 4th year doing these now,
Yeah, it's been a
so
while.
yeah. Um, and when I heard the process, I was like, "Oh, that that's actually." Like, that's doable, and you can kinda get an idea, and yeah, again, you're not gonna project the outlier seasons, you're not gonna project
D-
the breakouts, but it
DJ
re
Moore's DJ Moore. What I think DJ Moore is going to be, you're not going
yeah,
to be able to project that.
right. But it gives me a good sense of, well, how many targets and what kind of target share does DJ Moore what is he actually looking at this year, even if I give the Bears a spike of passing,
Yep.
right? I bring them back to reality with passing. Instead of 12 attempts a game, maybe I get them to, like, 19 or 20, right? But if DJ Moore's commanding a 25% target share of 20 pass attempts, what does that look like over the course of the season? And then I might just end up out on DJ Moore now at that point, right? So that is what it's very useful for.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed me and Taylor talking a little bit about his projections and what his projection system is. If you did, if you want to see more, click on over to one of our other videos right here. Taylor talks a little bit about some of his breakouts, some of his sleepers, and some of his busts for this upcoming year.